Hello, everyone, and welcome back to episode 2 of Enigmatica 6 Expert Mode. Wait a minute, and welcome back to episode 6 of Enigmatica 2 Expert Mode. Today, I think I owe you guys some building. Our actual goals for today are to finish up all the rooms and places that we've neglected. Number 2 is to get started into thermal expansion. And finally, we're going to wrap it up by getting a start into our AE2 chamber. Sound good? Great. And since we're going to be building so much, why not upgrade our tools? We now have access to a much better material, Supremium. Going off the stats, it's one of the best materials, period. And even though it's the endgame material for mystical agriculture, we won't be using that at all. That's because Supremium dust drops from withers, and combining that with a Superium ingot, which our mob farm does give us, lets us create Supremium ingots that we can melt down and cast into our tool parts. As you can see, it is quite the upgrade for our gear. To avoid making the building section one big time lapse, I thought that I'd give a little bit of insight into my building process, and a great example to show this is the forestry room. When planning out a room, the very first thing I ask myself is, what does this room need to do? And like many other mods, the forestry room needs to house the forestry machines. The main ones are going to be the carpenter, the thermionic fabricator, and the squeezer. But we should also keep in mind that there eventually comes a multi-block version. These are much bigger and we'll have to leave room for them. After the purpose, I look at the constraints that I have. In this case, I cannot expand backwards because there's already a hallway there. Similarly, I know that I'm going to have some kind of staircase down to the industrial craft room. Those are what I call the practical considerations. And after they're done, I start using aesthetic to guide my design ideas. I know that this IC2 room is supposed to be a forgotten tomb. So if this room needs to connect to it, it needs to either share the aesthetic or be a transition point. From here, I might realize that one way to make things feel forgotten is to show some evidence that someone hid it away. And what I'm specifically thinking of is having the section of the wall that leads to the staircase be something that got boarded up. And from this point, the consequences of what we've come up with help shape the room. If someone boarded up an entrance, then it's not going to be in a room that would have a lot of traffic. It would be in something obscure, like a storage room. It's not going to be ornate like the mechanism room is, but neither is it going to be something that you don't care about. And after this point, I like to just start to build. So, now that I'm done, let's see what I've come up with. As you can tell, I kind of stuck to the principle of keeping the walls very plain, very functional. The only fancy architecture in here is the roof. But for the rest, it's kind of a storage room with these big piles of crates in each corner, and some cutouts where we will eventually put the multi-blocks. And these big crates here actually open and give us access to our machines. And here at the end, this boarded up wall can actually be flown through and will lead us down into the industrial craft area. Now, although I like how it turned out, one thing I didn't account for was how forestry machines work. If you want to make something in the thermionic fabricator, you need to tell the machine what it's going to be. If I wanted to make iron electron tubes, I cannot just put in iron and redstone. You need to actually draw out the recipe before it can start. And this means that for automation purposes, we would need one fabricator for each recipe that we want to run. And frankly, that's just too many. So I think it's best to hold off on automating this stuff until we have the actual multi-block, because this does not need a pre-configured recipe. But with forestry as done as we can for now, let's move on to the next mod, extra utilities. While I know that eventually we're going to need the rainbow generator, which is a whole thing, it doesn't otherwise have many machines that we need to place down. So with this room, the goal is to keep it pretty simple. In this case, I'm gonna be honest and say that I don't know what I want this room to be, and when I find myself in this situation, well, I just start building and see what happens. So I went ahead and got a little start into this room, and I've realized that it's actually fine to keep this not as its own room, but as a little bend in the hallway. We can put a resonator here, and then I was thinking that what we could put here is the Dragon Egg Mill. This gives a ton of grid power, it's one of the best sources in the game, and it's really not very expensive. Plus, it's not like we're doing anything else with the Dragon Egg. We can place it down in the middle here, and put the egg on top, and now all that I think is missing is some kind of decoration for it, and I have just the thing. If you've seen the short I uploaded a couple days ago, you might know what's coming. But man, am I proud of this. I'll spare you the details on just how long this took to make, but I really love how it looks, and I will absolutely be using this around. Plus, look at how perfectly the egg nests in between it. And even though it was a pain to do, I think that these scales came out super well. At a distance, the effect that it gives it is just awesome. In any case, I'll stop bragging now because it's time to move on. We are not done building. Next up on our building checklist is industrial foregoing. Because this room is going to have so many hallways in almost all directions, I'm instead going to try and make this one a little bit more vertical. Maybe some kind of staircase hugging the walls that goes down, with little rooms for each machine off to the side. Let's see how it goes. Now, what you're seeing here is the stuff that would normally get cut out of a video, but because there's this building focus, I thought I should show off the mistakes, the bad that comes along with the good. Like I'd mentioned, I wanted to make this a vertical area, so I dug down a bit and I wanted to experiment with these platforms. The idea of having thin, rickety bridges connecting areas that would be dug into the wall where you can have a couple machines. And while I still like that idea, this execution, for example, is something that doesn't work, and I think it's important to show that off. Because this area is so small, even though the pathways are only 1 block wide, it still feels really cramped at a distance. It doesn't highlight the verticality of the area, which, to put it simply, means that it's not doing its job and I need to try again. But I thought that it was worth pointing out that I am not a perfect builder by any means, and mistakes are often just part of the process. And of course, mistakes can help you make better decisions in the future. As you can see from this revised version, the vertical aspect of this is highlighted much better. Rather than those crisscrossing platforms, the center here is open, which highlights how steep it is. And to highlight that same vertical aspect, I've made a little bit of a gradient here from this darker stone up to the less damaged lighter stone. On the sides, we just have some little rooms where we're going to be able to fit some automation. And the bottom here is currently unfinished, but what we're going to be placing here is the industrial foregoing laser, which is the only way to gather certain ores. I'm also realizing I never fixed this wall. Notes for later. But while I was making these rooms, I realized that running ME cables to all of them might be a little annoying. And at this point, I think we can do better than that. I think it's time we go wireless. Wireless connectors let us transfer signals automatically and are not that expensive in terms of material. However, there is one important thing to note. Let's say I put these one block apart and connect them. Power used 14. 7 blocks apart, we're now up to 60. They should be about 20 blocks apart now. We're at 280 per tick. It increases exponentially. So, although they're really nice, at this stage in the game, we do not want to be abusing these. After seeing how much power these cost, maybe we hold off on using them. I'm gonna set some cables up the old-fashioned way, and we'll come back to those when I'm a little bit richer. I'm also going to make myself a wireless crafting terminal, and once we craft it, we can put down our security terminal. I will remember that I need to make a biometric card for it. Then we should be able to link our controller and place down our wireless access point. But now, we can access it with just a simple key press. Also, while we're taking a little bit of a silly break here, you'll notice that I got a full set of quantum suit armor from our mob farm. And check out what that does when we try and run on this brownstone. The speed is absolutely crazy. It is so ridiculously fast. I can just zoom around. Oh yeah, and I got some cats. But enough of that. I think it's time to get back to something a little bit more practical. And in our case, that's the thermal machine frame. This is kind of a test of all previous automation, because it requires casings from pretty much every previous mod. I've gone ahead and encoded the recipe, we'll ask for 4 of them, and we'll see if our system's up to the task. The answer seems to be yes. This unlocks the thermal chapter, and I'm really glad that it seems to be pretty comprehensive. Because unlike a mod like Mystical Agriculture, which has a very clear goal, to produce resources, thermal just kind of has a machine for everything. Wanna charge your ore? Sure, go for it. Wanna melt some stuff? Yeah, of course. The induction smelter unlocks new materials. The phytogenic insulator allows us to grow things extremely quickly. It just kind of does a little bit of everything. So, to reflect that little bit of everything attitude, I figured that we could actually put these machines here, in these little nooks that are in the majority of our hallways. There's space for several blocks in each of them, and most of them have an actual AE2 line running underneath, so it's a pretty convenient spot. I'll start making my way through the machines in order, with the redstone furnace, the magma crucible, an induction smelter, a pulverizer, the more machine frames. Man, that's satisfying. A fractionating still, a compactor, a sawmill, the energetic infuser, and the fluid transposer. So now that we have our machines from thermal, let's set some of them up. And I'm going to start by making one of the thermal alloys, lumium. This is made in a fluid transposer. Okay, simple enough. And the components are tin silver alloy and energized glowstone. The energized glowstone comes from a magma crucible, and the tin silver alloy from an induction smelter, which we'll put on the other side. How this works is pretty simple. The interface is going to push into a storage crate. This is just here as a buffer. From here, we'll place down some conduits, filter what we extract. The induction smelter will be receiving silver and tin, while the magma crucible gets glowstone. We can test it out manually. We'll give the magma crucible its glowstone, and the induction smelter the silver and tin. Once an operation is done, the energized glowstone gets pushed into the fluid transposer, combines with the tin silver alloy, and produces lumium. All that's left is to send it back into our system. Signalum is going to require the same setup, this time with redstone. I've gone ahead and copied the setup for Signalum, the other thermal material, and we should see that our Shibuichi alloy is getting turned into Signalum ingots. I have no clue how to say this, by the way. Someone please correct me if I'm wrong. Besides this, the main other thermal material is Enderium, which is made in pretty much the same way, but it requires a lead platinum alloy that we don't really make at the moment. Also an important note, These items tend to go back into your system better if you actually connect it. Pro tip for you. And on the whole, I think these little setups manage to be pretty unobtrusive, which is always a big plus. So, now we have Lumium. But why did we want this thing anyways? Well, to make the phytogenic insulator, which allows us to grow all sorts of crops in a really compact area, we need aluminum gear. And similarly, for the sapling infuser augment, which is what lets us grow trees, we need lumium plates. So, I figured we'd get a head start on these and automate them. But once we craft some more frames, we can go ahead and make our phytogenic insulator and the sapling augment. And now, this is the part where I remember that to put an augment in, we need an upgrade. So let's make some of those. Much better. Despite it having power, a sapling, and water, the very observant of you might notice that nothing is happening. That's because it's also going to need phytogrow, which is composed of nitrates, sawdust, and slag. Our arc furnace and blast furnaces give us plenty slag. The sawdust we get from the precision sawmill for mechanism, so all that we need is the niter, which can come from crushing gunpowder. And hey, will you look at that? We have over 100 stacks. It's not what I would call fully automatic, but hey, we can make a lot of it to start with. And as soon as we throw it in, we're gonna start producing acacia logs. However, to make it recycle these saplings back into the input slot requires an upgrade that we can't quite make right now. So instead, I present to you the peak of automation. It quite literally just takes the sapling out from this side and puts it back in. But it does mean that we can now finish our automation of this all, and that the acacia logs are going into our ME system. And if at this point you're wondering, well, why do I care about acacia logs? That's because down here in the industrial foregoing area, I've set up this little system to place down acacia logs, have some fluid extractors do their thing, and make tiny dry rubber for us. So, this is just going to run passively until it decides that it has enough tiny dry rubber, at which point this level emitter will turn off and these will stop placing the blocks. Further below, I've also made a little mob room here, and this is our good old mob slaughter factory, slaughtering mobs, which is making us pink slime. Beyond making the item itself, this pink slime can be used in a fluid sieving machine. If we give it 2 buckets and an iron ingot, we get a pink slime ingot. These have a couple uses, frankly not that many, but they make reinforced pink slime. And if you're wondering why reinforced pink slime is useful, that's because it gives crazy durability modifiers. It is straight up better than the infinity ingot, than supremium, than chaotic cores. It is the best. So we can cast it onto a tool rod, and look at what it does to our pickaxe durability. 8,300 at the moment, 24,000. That's almost tripling it. And it takes our sword from 8,600 to almost 19,000. This is an absolutely beautiful material. And with our new tools in hand, and a beautiful sunset on our faces, I think that's a pretty good spot to wrap up the episode. Give it a little bit of symmetry, you know? Start it by upgrading our tools, end it with upgrading our tools. It's balanced. I realized that one of our goals was to start the AE2 chamber, and well, that's not gonna happen. I'm still finalizing the ideas that I want for this space, and the next episode is going to be all about upgrades to our ME system, because just look at this sad thing. I desperately need to fix this, so it feels nicer to unify all the content about it anyways. But what I can offer is a lot of loot crates. I always felt like they should make a sound when you open them. Maybe I'll add it in post. Anyways, let's see what we get. Wow, this one's really rare, I think. Okay, maybe it's fixed now? There we go. Well, I've seen better, but the shield is pretty cool. Now this is a look. Alright, seriously now. Thank you all very much for watching, and stay cool.